Five Nights at Freddy's is a game that needs very little introduction. It is, in simple terms, a sit-and-survive horror game where you must fend off animatronic characters by shutting doors while preserving power. That's really simple. But if that's all to the game, then how did it take the world by storm? And how is it so terrifying? And on a side note, why does every FNAF playthrough which goes on for long enough eventually turn into
Fuck me! Oh, fuck me! I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm dead. Oh, fuck! Oh, no, no, no! God damn it! God damn, it was such a good attempt!
As I said before, the first 5 nights you're simply watching the animatronics on cameras and then shutting the doors. That sounds simple. So how does it scare people? I believe that any good FNAF game relies on 3 things, and that's what I call the 3 T's. These are tension, terror, and tactics. To have a good FNAF game, you must have all 3. Some games rely on some more than others, but the first 5 Nights at Freddy's focused on all 3 of them. And the first on that list is tension. One of the key parts in tension is the atmosphere. Once you're in the first night, you're sat in a room filled with nothing but sound. You can't get up, you can't explore, all you can do is interact with the environments around you and close 2 doors, flash 2 lights, and look at the camera system. You're left to your senses like a fish in a barrel, with nothing but the echoes of the establishment to permeate through the air. You do have phone guys call to get through the first bit, but that's mostly just corporate spiel. The area is dark. You're working a night shift. The location is supposed to be open during the day, which makes the entire restaurant feel forbidden. Feels like you're not supposed to be there. Feels like you're going to be told off and escorted to leave. And yet the consequences are much worse. You'll get killed by that which waits in the dark. There are multiple shots in the game where they seem to be staring into the camera. You can even get some hallucinations. The audio isn't just there for fun. This tension that's building, it is amounting to something. And whether it be a Freddy laugh or the sounds of pots and pans, they're getting closer and closer. A new time player might shut the door incredibly early, or they might leave it open. Both have their consequences. Leaving the power on for too long, the area goes dark, and then jump scare. And that leads into terror. The terror of the game is seeing the animatronics, seeing them inch closer and closer. The terror is building in tow with the tension. And then, when they appear at the door, it's almost like a mini jump scare. It's a back and forth exchange where you're closing, shutting and opening doors as the sound cues alert you, and if you're not quick enough, game over. And with that, we're brought to the final T, tactics. This is what makes the game so replayable. First time players are scared, but veterans have it down to a T. They prefer harder difficulties, and they know how to go through every single nook and cranny. The game starts you feeling powerless, but you're able to understand the mechanics quite quickly, understanding that shutting the door is your primary means of defense, and you shouldn't do it immediately. Then, when you start figuring out routines of all the different animatronics, how you're supposed to back them into corners, how you're supposed to keep them at bay. This can be seen through Foxy needing to be checked up on, and from Freddy getting closer and closer with you needing to keep an eye on him for he stole at your door forever. But this is also what makes the game infuriating over a period of time, because once you know exactly how everything functions, the game no longer functions on pure terror and uncertainty, and instead functions on reaction time, resource management, with an increase of difficulty as the nights progress. The multitude of hard challenges the game inspires proves this. The 420 mode was infamous for being difficult upon launch. Multiple channels sought after the recognition of being able to beat such a hard challenge. And yet, they would have tons of outtakes simply raging, because the game wasn't scary for them anymore. They knew what to expect. Those sounds were just sounds of failure now. No longer tension building and terror rising, it was a mistake. They did something wrong, or perhaps they slipped up once. Back and forth dance was no longer filled with terror, it was filled with pressure. Nothing but pressure. It wasn't scary, it was tense. It made the dance infuriating. But once you clear that obstacle, once you climb that insurmountable mountain of aggressive AI, you're no longer powerless in your chair. You are a defense machine. You know how to keep them all at bay, and you are glad. I could go more in depth with how all the characters interact with the environment and which character is the most strikingly interesting, but I'm going to move on to another game. A game which takes sit and survive genre in a completely new direction. The joy of creation.
That's it?
Now let me preface this by saying that the joy of creation was in its first iterations a FNAF fan game. Does that exclude it from being talked about? No, this is my video and I'm going to be talking about what makes FNAF games stick with audiences and gain popularity. This includes fan games. And, in the end, this tangent doesn't really matter as the Joy of Creation is an officially licensed fan game thanks to the Fazbear Fanverse initiative, with merchandise and a full game on its way. That being said, currently all that is available for the new Joy of Creation is the demo. And oh boy is it good. The gameplay mostly consists of looking at the cameras to learn more about the free entrances that surround you, as well as opening containers around the room to find objects of interest, with a room to the side being everything that needs to be for your power management. And the gameplay loop is gorgeous. Not only is the time passing directly linked to your own abilities, but all of the threats are manageable. The first threat, although I really wouldn't call him that, is Freddy. Freddy isn't really a threat. You want to see Freddy. If you see Freddy on the cameras, you must go over to that entrance and flash him where he stands. You have to do this 12 times and then the night is over. However, if you don't flash where he is, Freddy will leave. This means you missed the chance to progress the night. Then you've got Bonnie. If you see Bonnie on the cameras, do not stare at him. If you stare at Bonnie, your camera will get punched in the face. And if you accidentally flash Bonnie at one of the entrances, you'll get punched and your flashlight will lose all of its charge. Then you've got Foxy. Foxy needs to be stared at the cameras and continuously locked into his eyes. Once he does this, he leaves. If you don't, he'll come. If you flash the entrance with Foxy's at, he'll kill you. Finally, we get to Chica. Now Chica's mechanic is kind of different. She doesn't appear at any of the entrances, and you don't need to look around the camera. Instead, you need to use the second mechanic in the game, the containers. You see, there's containers all around the room, and if you open them, you've got a chance of finding a battery. These batteries are used for everything. The three cameras have a charge. The entire area has a charge, and if that charge goes out, you lose. And finally, your flashlight has a charge. So, how does Chica play into this mechanic? Well, the main gameplay loop mostly consists of you flashing Freddy in the eyes and then moving on to find Foxy before finding a battery to replenish your power. If you don't do this, the power will go out and you'll lose. Simple as. But Chica throws a wrench into this plan. Chica requires you to find cupcakes in all of the containers. First it starts with 3 and then it goes up to 6. Foxy also has a similar mechanic where you must lock eyes with him 6 times instead of 3, but I digress. Chica requires you to use a lot of your flashlight's charges and find all the cupcakes and flash them. This means you're around the room, and if Foxy isn't maintained, he could come kill you. The gameplay loop is incredibly addicting, and the rising tension is stellar, as only 2 of the animatronics are actual game enders, and yet each one works with the other spectacularly. It keeps you on your feet while remaining uncertain, with all of the otherwise untouchable factors in normal FNAF games also being completely up to you. Your power is completely rechargeable down to the individual camera, and you must recharge it tactfully. The time passing is completely up to the player's skill. This gameplay loop can feel incredibly rewarding, as once you beat the night, it isn't a factor of you slogging through the 6 hours, but rather you taking advantage of every opportunity thrown your way. And the monster that comes for you upon not keeping track of time and failing you to recharge your resources is enraged as you beat him in his own game. I've heard it's from the point of view of Scott Cawthon and his family, with literal demons rising up in place of the animatronics. And I think that's neat, but I don't really have time to talk about the story. Maybe I'll go in more depth when the full game comes out. But before I move on to the next segment, I think I have to quickly talk about the latest Joy of Creation trailer. Always. Oh my god, this is beautiful. I can't wait. I can't wait to buy this game and play it. It looks amazing, and this is just one segment based off one of the first game modes you could actually play in Joy of Creation, which wasn't in the story mode. It's a nice return, and it also means that there could be multiple game modes waiting, which we don't know about. Multiple different types of nights. I assume the traditional 5 nights we play in story mode are going to be there, but there's this one as well, so who knows what's waiting. And with that said, that's all I've got to talk about for Joy of Creation. But there is another fan game that caught my eye, and it's free roam. Most FNAF games rely on one core aspect, and that is the fact that the player is bolted to the office floor. And this means the creator can set up all the tension they want while putting all the necessary pieces together to create an engaging and yet horrific experience. But when that experience of being stuck with limited supplies to survive switches up and becomes free roam, how can it stay true to its roots? Is it only a FNAF game in name alone? When FNAF Security Breach came out, these questions flared. The conventions that formed the franchise had been changed, for better or worse, as now the player did not have to worry about being mindful of any resources or quickly shutting out an opposing threat. The game consisted of objectives that kept the player on their feet, and when the animatronic threat rose, players simply had to run away and hide from the issue. As well as the bugginess and the overall lighter tone, the game didn't retain the same foreboding and oppressive atmosphere that the rest of the franchise had, even down to the mechanics, where before we were trapped and somewhat powerless, now we can flee endlessly. There was attempts to remedy this through Ruin becoming much more linear, forcing areas to be more enjoyable in this style, as opposed to Security Breach's open world, which not only allowed bugs to blossom, but also large portions of horrorless and tension-dry gameplay. And while it is solid, and does well to try and make the Pizzaplex not so friendly, Ruin falls short of some of the other fan games that the community has made, which also try and make a free roam FNAF game. One of them is Fazbear Nights, a FNAF fan game made by T-Seg with a huge map that players should quickly pick up on. It is big while not being too big to be unrecognisable, and the entire game looks stellar, and it's an incredible joy to play with charm to boot, invoking that same forbidden feel as the first FNAF games. But this isn't a free roam game I'm going to be talking about. Instead, I'll talk about Those Nights at Fredbear's New Destiny. Originally, Those Nights at Fredbear's was a game being developed by Nixon, also known as the creator of The Joy of Creation. The project was unfortunately cancelled and Nixon moved on to other matters, but it was then when Rofne created Those Nights at Fredbear's New Destiny, a revamped iteration of the cancelled game. This game is amazing, and it has a unique way of making the tension build up drastically, as it assembles all the perfect qualities to terrorize the player, from the unique visual style to the audio, and yet many audio clips that you actually hear are actually from the original. The game seats you in the position of the Night God, with the caveat that you at some point through the night must restore your power in the generator. With all the actions you perform in the office drastically increase the draining of the power. The threats that come after you are pretty easy to understand as well, with Spring Bonnie and Freddy acting as near identical foes that can search the environment based off clues that you, the player, give about your location before pursuing you. That is, until they lose sight of you due to you hiding or locking yourself in the office. Fredbear is near identical, except he is huge, making him much harder to get around when the player bumps into him, as well as having a built-in no power mode boosting his speed dramatically, when all other animatronics become disabled due to no power being in the building. This is essentially a game over. And then finally, we have Plushtrap. He will run to the generator and attempt to sabotage you to get a near instant game over, draining all your power to zero. The only means of stopping him is picking him up and putting him on shelves to delay his progress. These characters keep the player on their feet in a way which feels organic and works well in the flow of gameplay. It really does capture the feeling of a FNAF game while being free roam, because even though the player is free to run around the entire establishment, they are locked in with limited safety, and the only way of maintaining that safety being on the other side of the map, next to where all the threats come from. There isn't a place the player can get any respite from, and they must remain constantly vigilant, as any slight action could have severe negative repercussions. In any given moment, the player must think about their next action carefully, and this is what made the first FNAF game so good. That tension that builds up from not knowing whether to push or take a risk could mean game over, and here it's reflected brilliantly. Even upon the night's completion, there is still time you have to pass to get to that exit. You must make a calculated decision. In the first FNAF game, eventually the cameras became obsolete, as players knew where each animatronic would be, and the light on the doors would be able to figure them out pretty easily. However here, the cameras, although players can still predict where the animatronics are going to be based off their movements and also your own movements, here they could serve some actual use, as if you want to leave the establishment, you have to figure out which exit to take, and whether you would be blocked by an animatronic. It's really, really good design. The cameras aren't really used much in my flow of gameplay, I found. Typically, I try and avoid any confrontation with the animatronics in uncertainty hallways, where I don't know whether the animatronic is down that hallway or not. I'll just avoid that situation by going early, and then listening to the doors as they get closer and closer. Or hiding. That works well. Overall, the game is absolutely great, as it locks you in a cage, with the exit only opening at a certain time, and even then you have to still get to it. I've had on multiple occasions the animatronic kill me seconds before I get out, and it's an awful feeling, but I do have some complaints. I haven't really done this with the other games, but I know the strategies in this game are to constantly recharge the generator, as not many animatronics enter there. However, they still do. This makes it entirely luck-based. I'm not a big fan of that entire idea. The fact that you could sit in the generator room juggling Plushtrap between these two shelves, it doesn't appeal to me. I find Plushtrap incredibly annoying, and I get that he's supposed to keep you on your toes and running through the establishment, chasing after him, making sure you don't get game overed. But if that's the case, it just leaves the player down to their skills of evading. Surely seeing the animatronic and running back to your office is what the game should want you to do. Or hiding in a room. The way Plushtrap works, if he's already on the move and you see him and another animatronic, you're basically dead, as he's gonna get into the office and destroy it, and you can't do anything. I feel like they could have added a different mechanic which would have relied on you staying in the office and the generator being a bit closer. Maybe have a separate thing you could use over in a different obscured location, like another camera. Maybe have a sort of puppet-like character where two cameras are on the opposite sides of the map and you can recharge the puppet while going to each one. I don't know, it's obviously complicated to make a game, but I find the Plushtrap just incredibly irritating. But overall, I think the game's really good and incredibly terror-filled. And I suppose maybe it's just my fear saying that I don't want to look for Plushtrap all across the map. But it seems more annoying than scary. But with all of that said, I I think the best ending I can do for this video is to take a look at what many believe should have been the final FNAF game created by Scott Cawthon. With this final game, I think it would be good to mention that before its release, no one knew what it would entail, and it showed up on a random day and its promotional page on Steam looked like this. It's not unusual for Scott to release troll games, so when this game was released for the low price of free, many believed this could simply be a game Scott made to troll them by teasing them that they weren't getting a FNAF game. But as many players opened the game, they were greeted with an Atari-level minigame, further confirming their suspicions. That's when Shadow Freddy begins glitching out the game and gives us a sneak peek of what the actual game is. It's an interview.
Audio prompt in
And 3, 2, 1. We are then given a charming introduction, which is not only humorous, but also well stylized, giving a good old slideshow look of a corporate environment. And it covers the gist of what we are doing in this establishment. No longer are we the night guard, we are the owner of this Fazbear establishment. And we have to make our decisions and choose how we are going to spend our money to make this place as good as it can be. Or will we fall to financial ruin? After that, the function of the game is revealed. During the night, funnily enough, we enjoy a calming, peaceful segment where we construct our pizzeria, choosing what sponsors we want, as well as what do we want to clutter the floors of the pizzeria, rats or mice, as well as our priorities for health and safety and the overall entertainment factor of the establishment in an overall fun little segment. But as we close up, the actual surviving comes in, as we are stuck in a tight, small, cramped room with 2 vents at the side of us. Essentially 2 thin, metallic hallways that animatronics could come through, if there is any here. The first night is riddled with confusion as the PC in front of you displays information that may seem a bit overwhelming at first, with a map included with motion triggers and tasks you must complete before the night is over. In fact, you don't get to leave until these tasks are done. That's time. And I will admit, once you figure out what to do, this first night is incredibly dull, knowing that there's no animatronics, but with that thought, you're given an interview with a twisted, molten Freddy. You have the option to throw him out or salvage him for parts. This interview is tense, and requires you to play audio and shock the animatronic if they move too close, and then the character is added to your pizzeria, but not on the establishment's floor. No, they are in the vents with you when you're wrapping up. And they get closer and closer. Also, don't get sued! This game reminds you that health and safety are very important. You don't want a kid slipping up on a wet spot and banging his head, as you would have to pay reparations. Given this game's humor, one of the main things this game and sister location did was have voice actors. Which actually comes to another reason why FNAF stuck around. Theories, and the underlying plots and secrets that the game hides from you. They're now given voices, and you're able to attach something to the very important messages that could have gotten missed in text. As well as that, you can finally hear the characters. There's an interesting gameplay loop which I won't get too much into. I've summarized the game, I've given it a few props for its humor and its overall contributions and climactic finale to the franchise.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting.
But I don't think this game is without its flaws. It is free, so you can't really complain too much. But I find the entire event system kind of boring. I get that it is a loop, and the gameplay is decent if you were to get into the mix of things. I'm not a big fan of removing cameras from the equation. I think it would be so much cooler if you could actually see these animatronics get closer and closer, but instead we're giving a simple motion trigger. The animatronics become nothing more than icons on a screen. Sure, you could make them seem as scary as they want. Brain can play tricks on you and imagine things which aren't there as they get closer and closer, making things much, much more intense as you can concoct any idea you wish about these animatronics, but in reality, they're dull. Scrapjob's awful, and I think it would be nice to have a camera. As well as that, all these animatronics are completely opposing characters. With a camera, you could have seen some chemistry between them. And I get that the point is that they're coming to your office to kill you. But you've got a murder victim and a murderer in the same establishment, and we don't get to see why they're not killing each other. With a camera, maybe you could show that these two were separated and weren't able to attack each other. And this could be why one of the animatronics was going to your office, to simply try and get around, but they're not able to, and therefore they have to kill you. But that isn't the case, and we're left with icons of scary images.
Leave me alone!
With not much charm. You could replace these icons with practically anything, including fruit. With that said, I think it's time I put a close to this video.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name. But I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift.